Hey guys, what's going on? Shaw here, and today in this video we're going to be taking a look at Ventunax and Spires of Ascension. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big advocate for simple bosses that have challenging mechanics. Similar to Grand Proctor Berlia, which is one of the first bosses that we covered in this series, Ventunax doesn't have a lot going on, but it can be a boss that feels very devastating on weeks like Tyrannical or high-end keys. So today in this video, we're going to be taking a look at all of the mechanics that he presents to the players in the dungeon, as well as how to handle them appropriately. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the mechanics, or I should say, two of the mechanics fall into the tank and how they're positioned. Depending on this is going to make the boss fight really easy or much more challenging than it needs to be. Let's quickly take a look at what this boss does. Like I said, Ventunax doesn't do much. He has two main abilities, which is called Dark Stride and Blinding Flash. Dark Stride is an ability that will always target a ranged player. If there are no range in your group, it will target a melee, but this is a rare case. When he casts Dark Stride, he will leave behind a Shadow Whirl, and Shadow Whirl is going to shoot out dark bolts going in a counterclockwise direction from the spawn point. The other ability is called Blinding Flash. Blinding Flash is a tank frontal that will always target the tank, typically following a Dark Stride, and can simply be avoided. Lastly, when Ventunax needs to recharge, he will, cast Recharge, and he will restore 5 energy every half second for 10 seconds. During his recharge phase, Shadow Whirls will now pulse Dark Bolt in every direction every time he gains energy. So, depending on where those Shadow Whirls are positioned, are going to either make or break your boss fight. So, with those out of the way, let's dive into the breakdown. Let's jump into exactly how the fight is going to play out. So, I'm going to slow this down to about, let's see, 70% speed, and we're going to take a look at it. So, this key was ran a few weeks ago. I don't remember when Spiteful Grievous was. It was probably like close to like 6 weeks ago now. So keep that in mind. This key was also burnt. We had one really outrageous wipe to, I think, the Prideful or the pack right before the boss. So our timer is going to be a little bit off, but this is probably the best clip I have from taking this fight. Executing this fight perfectly is really hard to do because there's just things that are going to happen based on where the boss is positioned, based on which range player it's going to jump to. So the Dark Stride will always target someone in range. If no one is classified as a range player, it's going to hit someone in melee. So if, let's just say you have this comp, but instead of let's just say Egg was, instead of playing Shaman, he was on his Paladin, and Sakai was a melee, it would jump to any of the melee instead. But if you do have a full melee group with just one range, you know that the Dark Stride is always going to target that range. So you can actually plan around like using things like Turtle or Bop or your Files if you're Kyrian. So there's a few workarounds to that, but that doesn't matter too much when it comes to the actual mechanics of the fight. So we're going to be pulling it from a weird angle. Typically you would be coming in from either side, but we had like, Sakai we rezzed over here. So that's why we're coming in from this angle, but it's kind of the same premise. So the idea of this fight is using, a big word of triangulation, or in other words, just like using math and geometry to determine angles to figure out a safe place to stand. And a lot of players don't know this, but based on where the tank is positioned is going to be where the Dark Stride, the dark bolts that come out of that Dark Stride's, the Dark Stride Shadow Whirl, that Shadow Whirl that he spawns whenever he does a Dark Stride, is actually going to start, and the angle is going to be based off of where the tank is standing. So I'm going to try to show it in this clip if I can point it out in an easy way. So we're going to be pulling him, and what I like to do is, in a lot of other boss fights I talk about this, but there's a fairly good guideline of where to tank the boss. So in this clip and in this boss, like primarily, I always recommend tanking him on this like ring, this ornate, design ring. You can also pull him on this other one. You just don't really want him much further or much closer because of just how the triangulation will work with the dark bolts that are being sent out. So the closer you have in the center, like especially when there's in the center of the room and on the outside of the room, the space becomes more limiting. So you want to either commit to dropping them all in the center or dropping them all on the outside. I've seen some tanks do some really weird stuff on this fight, but you're about to see in this clip how I tank this guy exactly. So what I'm doing here is positioning him on this ring, And then what I'm doing is I'm going to be facing him towards the outside. And the main reason for this is the blinding flash. But I also know as soon as he does his dark stride, the first dark bolt is going to come out this direction. And then it's always going to rotate, what direction? Counterclockwise this is. So it's always going to rotate counterclockwise. So you always know which way it's going to go. So if we play this a little bit, you're going to see the dark stride come out. This comes out almost immediately. You have about 10 seconds to get him into the position you want. And then he's going to stride, and I think he jumped at Sakai since Egg was right here, and the boss is obviously not on top of Egg. So what I do here as a tank player is I stand still, and I bait him back on top of the same shadow world that he just spawned. And the reason for this is if you can line it up perfectly, I don't do it necessarily in this clip that well, but if you stand in the same position you did the first time, these orbs will overlap identically. So DPS have more room to stand. And this is really important in like a longer fight. So like on a Tyrannical week or a pretty high fortified, if you're playing with range players. The issue with doing this strat, and a reason why I don't see a lot of tanks do this, maybe they haven't figured it out, or melee have to really pay attention here. So what you do is you just simply rotate around the boss as these orbs come. So you'll see Cutilate standing here and Zev here. And this next orb is coming here, and the next one's going to spawn out this way. So as this happens, they're going to rotate this way, and then I'm going to rotate with the dark bolts that are coming out from this. So I'm going to dodge the blinding flash, and then I'm going to try to reposition him on top of this before the next dark stride, so it's overlapped. Unfortunately, though, if you can see, it's here, and the boss is here. So it's really difficult if you move and the boss moves that it becomes desynced, but that's not an issue. It's still going to be safe. It's just in a perfect world, if you can keep them perfectly overlapped, that would be the best case scenario. So after the second dark stride, he's going to then go into recharge state soon. So what you do is you move about at like a 45-degree angle towards your next position. And this is because right after his recharge is done, he's going to do a dark stride right away and then spawn another shadow world. So in a perfect world, you want one here, and then you want to move about 45 degrees, plant one here, move 45 degrees again, plant one here, and then you would finish it. You would move a little bit past the 45-degree mark, and you would hold him on the outside of the room to kill. If the fight's going longer than that, you're probably not timing the key because you have incredibly low DPS, or you're doing some crazy high key, but this boss on Tyrannical week is a nightmare. So blinding flash is going to go out, and then he's going to charge, I think, shortly after this. No, this is recharge. Sorry, I got ahead of myself talking about the positioning. So he's going to recharge, and if you notice here, during the recharge, because I'm moving him essentially like halfway across the room, these orbs are going to be pretty good, and melee are going to have a little bit of reaction time, right? And then if you also see, some of these are slightly overlapped. Some of these that are coming out, they're, because of how close they are, they're coming out at a similar angle based on where I was positioned earlier in the fight. So it all comes down to tank positioning, is based on how bad these orbs are. So a tank who knows how to stand still in this fight is going to be definitely a huge boon to their group. So as you can see, these two are a little out of sync because of how I didn't have the boss perfectly overlapped. But if you have them perfectly overlapped, you would expect these orbs to be perfectly overlapped. I am going to point out another downside. I mean, this is something you shouldn't be getting hit by a mechanic anyways, but if it is perfectly overlapped, there is a chance you're going to get a double tick when you get hit by this, and the DPS are going to die. Though, honestly, in a high enough key, DPS who get hit by this take a very, very, very large hit. So we're lucky because it's fortified. I don't know if someone gets hit in this fight or not. I think we play it pretty clean. So again, then this is another situation where it's like they're pretty close, but they're not perfect, but it's enough to melee to move to either side to continue doing DPS. So right after that recharge, he's going to dark stride out, and that shadow world is going to spawn. My goal, if possible, is to overlap these two. That is plan A. If you can't move him back there for whatever reason, if we backed it up a little bit, it's because of the two dark bolts that were coming out. The dark bolts were right on top of where his shadow world was spawning. He also charged pretty far, and then I knew the blinding flash was coming up shortly after. So I didn't necessarily have time to get him back into position. So in my head, I was like, okay, plan B. Plan B is to pull him a little bit, like pretty much in line with where this Shadow World's going to come out. So I'm going to dodge. You're going to see this one's going to come perfectly through him. So that leaves melee with enough room behind the boss. And the next Shadow World should go behind them towards Sakai. So you pull him about, 10 yards out. In line with one of the Shadow Worlds is plan B. This one makes the recharge phase a little bit more chaotic, but again, like it's all based on his health, right? He's at 15% already, so I know by the time the recharge phase happens, it's pretty much going to be going for a kill here. So Dark Stride's going to go out again, and then same thing. You're going to pretty much base your angle and how far you run him. You want about 25 yards out, and you want to go pretty much from where you were this recharge, but you also want to keep this one in mind too. So about 25 yards out, 30 yards out from the closest. So I'm pretty much going to be moving him to where Sakai was. So at this point, I'm going to be running towards him, beating him kind of halfway and dragging him a little bit further, but not perfectly in line, or at least I don't think so. So a little bit past perfectly in line. So I saw that this is where the angle was. So I wanted to move him a little bit past and far enough away from these two that we would have more room based off of these cones, because all of these are intersecting at different points, especially during the recharge. And most of you guys, if you're watching this video, you've probably done this boss and have been struggling with it. And the reason why is because it becomes very, very chaotic by the second recharge because of how many of these Shadow Worlds are out. So that's why overlapping them is very important when it gets to higher keys, because when you're overlapping them, you have more room to work with. Your range don't have to move as much, so they can keep up better uptime. Right now, there is like a range meta. It's been a range meta for a long time now. We haven't seen melee be super popular, like melee cleaves be super popular since probably like Battle for Azeroth Season 3, where it was like just run 3 rogues. Obviously, that was insane. So with there being a range meta, you want as much floor space as possible. Now, to reset this boss, this is just a side note, like this room over here is like totally open. I've seen some tanks like pull him way out here, and then towards the end of the fight you can get him kind of towards where the next, like the angel comes down to carry you across. So you have a lot more room to play with, so you can be more liberal with how much, like how far you run with him. Like you can just run with him like 30-40 yards, but just be careful and be mindful of where your range are positioned. So this last recharge is going to get pretty hectic here. This is just a 20, so it's not too crazy for the damage that we're pulling. But because of these angles, like this was a safe spot here. Again, the triangulation. So based on where this is spawning and these two are, I know that like they're going to be kind of coming across like this, and like we have room in here for melee to stand to be able to keep up time. And range theoretically probably should be over here. They're in a bad position. If you're in the middle, you're probably doing the fight wrong. Range kind of want to stick to the outside. But again, this is a tank guide, not a DPS guide. So this is why though, so to help your DPS maintain uptime, both in melee and for range. So fight's pretty simple. On tyrannical weeks, just don't come in here. This dungeon is fairly difficult. If you don't have crazy high burst single target DPS, it's a very difficult dungeon to get down. I have seen it get to like a third recharge. At that point, you want the boss, if you are going to hit a third recharge, let's just say we dropped it here, right? And we dropped him here and we dropped him here. You want to move the boss like a little bit off center, just pretty much at the edge of the room, and just pray that nothing gets hit. You do have other areas to use. You have, both entrances plus this like little patio platform back here, but you never want it to be at that point. So super simple boss fight, but it's on the tank's positioning based on where these orbs are spawning, the dark bolts from the Shadow Worlds. So I hope this guide helps. I hope it kind of gives you a little bit of insight to this boss and how it works. Next time you're in Spires, pay attention. Watch where the dark orbs come out. It should always come out facing you, unless someone rips aggro for some reason, or like a pet taunt. I don't know why that would happen, but I've seen some pretty crazy convokes. And then like the blinding flash is always a tank frontal, which will always I didn't know I can zoom. That's cool. The tank frontal, it'll always be a tank frontal. So the positioning on this fight is actually pretty, like it's very precise on where the tank is positioned. Good luck, guys. Good luck on the keys. I hope it helps. And let me know in the comment section below which boss you'll like to see next. I'm trying to kick back up this guide. I've been pretty busy lately but I'm trying to get kind of back in the swing of things, trying to work on kind of my own life schedule a little bit so I have more time to make these videos and edit them. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're staying happy, healthy, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.